put me immediately on a mental discord with myself, with my upbringing, with my religion, that I was an infidel. And I had to deal with that. And I only want to tell everyone it's not easy.
I'm sure it isn't. It
No.
must be horrendously difficult. But let me just press on that a little further. I mean, was it, do I understand this correctly, was 9/11 the incident, bin Laden's remarks that made you realize you were no longer a Muslim? Would that not be the correct way of putting it?
Well, I think in Holland we always say the drop that made, een drop op een gloeiende plaat.
Right, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, the straw, that sort of thing, yeah. But what happened on the 11th of September was so huge that I can hardly call it a drop. But if I consider my life between 1992, when I ran away from the arranged marriage, to the 11th of September, I can say I didn't really lead a very religious life. I started to avoid religious people. I took off my headscarf. I took off my hijab. I also took off my mental and intellectual headscarf. I would read the books that we were required to read for political theory. I'm looking at some Harris. And I would just pretend, I just tell myself, you know what? If I read on, I know I'm sinning. So, I'd say, God, I'm only reading this just to get my marks. I don't really believe in this.
Okay.
But then I'll read on because I was very curious about it. Then I'll go out with my friends. I had a boyfriend. I would drink wine. I would do all these things.
Right. But you were still saying you were a Muslim if anybody asked.
Oh, not only that. I was extremely defensive. There's a guy called Joris Luijendijk, who was the correspondent for one of the very prestigious papers in the Netherlands, and he had written a book, and which he said, if you're a good Muslim, you give a tick to your wife. And he had a quotation from the Quran, and I was furious. I was like, how on earth can he say this? Mm-hmm. And it had to do with him being a non-Muslim, reading the Quran and actually understanding it. It had to do with the cognitive dissonance of being told exactly, being confronted with what was in there. But I had accomplished all the mechanisms of remaining a Muslim and not leading the life of a Muslim person.
I see. Now, your reaction, let me just come back to what you were saying about, your reaction to 9/11 and your reaction to what bin Laden said. There might have been another possible reaction. This kind of goes to a key point. You might have said, you might have thought, bin Laden is just wrong about Islam.
Yeah.
Bin Laden misunderstands that he's dangerous because he's peddling a false idea of Islam that you chose to think. Actually, bin Laden is right about Islam, and I want nothing further to do with it. Is that correct?
I could have said that, but between 1995 and 2000, I had seen the Dutch society go through probably its most painful self-examination, where people were thinking, what had we done in the Second World War? There were legal claims. Some of the members of the Jewish minority were getting rights back. I had read this book called Hitler's Willing Executioners. We were to read it. Right. So I was completely steeped in this literature and the history of the Second World War with one point. We should now pause and take a look at what was my responsibility as an individual and what would I have done under the same circumstances. So I didn't have the comfort of saying, oh, bin Laden, he's wrong. It doesn't have anything to do with my religion.
Right.
I graduated in 2000. So when he had all these quotes, all I could do was just open it up and see, and it was in there. And then you can't escape it. So in the year 2001, what would that be, 50 years? I'm very bad in counting. But so many years from the Second World War, it was easy to judge every German who had killed a Jewish person, a gay person, and so on. It was very easy to judge every Dutch person who had helped accommodate that. There was this expression called, I didn't know. All that was taken away from me.
I see. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask
intellectually.
Yes,
so,
I understand.
Yeah, there was no room left to hide.
Right.
And so I couldn't say bin Laden misunderstood the Quran. I could only see bin Laden understood the Quran properly. He understood the Prophet. He was a product of everything that I had believed in. Besides that, I myself, in 1989, when Salman Rushdie was sentenced to death, put the fatwa, I thought it was a good thing. So there was no way of me to say, you know what, I can just turn my back on this. That would mean never opening a newspaper, or opening a newspaper every time and thinking, oh, every time there's something about terrorism, about Muslim radicals, I'm going to pretend I don't know anything about it, doesn't have anything to do with me, it has nothing to do with my religion. The religion has been hijacked and so on, you know, the normal fallacies we hear every day.
Okay. I think it's interesting that quite a few European intellectual commentators have, let's say, mixed feelings about the position you've taken on Islam. They aren't defending, obviously they aren't defending radical Islam, but the point they've made is that, you know, there are many different Islams, and there is hope of a modernized, reformed Islam that is compatible with Western democracy. And you've taken a very strong and a very moving, in other words, you know, a very effective position against that view. I mean, you're arguing that, I think, that Islam is not reformable. What do you make of that criticism? And
I'm not saying Islam is not reformable. I'm just saying Islam has incredible obstacles that make it very difficult for it to be reformed. Islam as a set of ideas. But you have Muslims. I don't know, someone today mentioned to me, is it possible to have CE Muslims? So it was Christmas, Easter Muslims. And I thought, you know what?
For a moment I thought you meant Church of England Muslims. That would be even harder to imagine.
And my answer immediately was, of course, that is possible. Not only that, there are a lot of Christmas, Easter Muslims. I just met one, Hanan, and Reza Aslan. And there are lots of Muslims who can somehow find a balance between living in civil society, partaking of modernity, really becoming successful, contributing to it, and then somehow finding spirituality and meaning within Islam. But reality dictates that that's not the majority. Most Muslim countries are dictatorships. There's no democracy. Most Muslim people, the 1.5 or 1.2 billion people that everyone is talking about, most of them are either illiterate or find themselves in very difficult circumstances where if they are not in economic problems, then they have freedom problems. Given that reality, I would say we have to separate two things. One is the intellectual rigor of finding the truth. It's something that people like Sam Harris simply do and say, what does the Quran say? And it's the same sort of critical analysis that was applied to the Bible, to the Talmud, to all religious books, but also to all other ideologies such as communism and Nazism and so on. If you apply that rigor, you'll arrive only at one conclusion. And by the way, you can have a more honest, more thrilling discussion with the people who truly believe in that. The other one is the strategic political approach, which is if we tell the truth too loudly, we may offend our political allies. We may offend people whom we have labeled moderate. We don't even know if they consider themselves moderate or not, who may become our allies. So let's just say Islam is peace. And you see this strategy being repeated every few months or every few years. Gordon Brown said, we're not going to say anything about, there are no Muslim terrorists. There's no relationship between Islam and terrorism. Right. President of the United States, Islam is peace and Islam is great. That's the political, but that's not intellectual. That's not philosophy. That's not truth-telling. And by the way, it's a philosophy that backfires.
Right. Do you see a difference in attitudes on this issue in America as compared with Europe? Are you conscious of a difference?
Yes, but then I think with a cautious remark that I've been exposed to a very little bit of America, a very elite bit of America. I didn't come like the usual immigrant, so I don't know what goes on at birthday parties in this country, but I know what goes on in birthday parties in Holland. Right. So having said that, the public discourse seems to be more honest, more confrontational.